Hey, welcome back to NextWealth Insights. My name is Heather Hopkins, founder and managing director of NextWealth. I'm joined by my co-host, Alistair Walker, managing director of HA&W and a chartered financial planner. Hello, Alistair.
Hi, Heather. Awesome to be back for episode 6 of the companion podcast to our AI Lab membership group. Really excited to be speaking with today's guest, who you're about to introduce. But before we dive in, as always, I'd like to thank our sponsors for making this possible. So thank you to Salesforce, SS&C, Aviva, and Fidelity. Um, we've got a great guest today, and also for those of you listening on audio, a slightly different episode planned. We'd really like to showcase some uses of AI in financial services, some best practices, and so this podcast is going to include a 10-minute or so product demo, the link to which is going to be in the show notes. Over to you, Heather.
Fantastic. And it was one of the things we wanted to do with AI Lab was give people intros to some of the exciting tech innovation and the tech providers that are out there. But the AI Lab is really about helping practitioners showcase what they're doing. So the podcast is a really great format. So we're delighted to have Alan Goering here from AdvisoryAI. He's the founder and CEO. We already heard about AdvisoryAI from Johnny Stubbs. He presented at our last event in September and was a guest on the podcast. Johnny, of course, is from Lyft, and they've had some fantastic results from using AdvisoryAI for meeting notes and suitability reports. So really, really looking forward to this. Alan was a financial planner at Clearwater Wealth Management before he sold the firm to SJP, and he founded AdvisoryAI with Roshan Tamil Selvan, an engineer and serial entrepreneur, in 2023. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to go ahead and do this.
Excellent. So we're going to kick off, as I said, with the product demo of Advisory AI. We talk to you and about Advisory AI like everybody who listens already knows who you are, because we've got sort of Johnny has talked about his work at Lyft with you. But I think it'd be really helpful as you kick us off with the demonstration to talk a little bit about Advisory AI's what's the reason for existence, what's the vision, what pain points are you trying to solve, and then sort of take us through how things actually work with it.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. A bit of background. So what we've created from our side is essentially an end-to-end productivity tool for both advisors as well as support staff. So we have names for the models that we've created. We have two models, one which is a support staff model and another which is an advisor model. The support staff model is called Emma. A bit of backstory to this. When I ran my financial planning practice, the first power planner I hired, her name was Emma, so it's named after her. Whereas the advisor plan is named Evie. So not named after any particular person, just thought Evie and Emma sounded nice. So what does this process look like? It's an end-to-end process. And what do I mean by that is once an advisor has a meeting, that meeting is recorded, transcribed. Evie can then go ahead and create the likes of meeting notes, hand over documents, fact finds, and also populate CRM systems. For example, it can go ahead and populate the fact find fields within IO. And then it gets passed on to the support staff through Emma. And through Emma, you can go ahead and create suitability letters and review letters, as well as summarize LOA packs. Now, I'd love to go ahead and show you this if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let me just share my screen. Fantastic. So there's a whole host of different things happening here. So on the left-hand side, you see a variety of different widgets. On the top, you see create report. Essentially, when you go through these widgets, you'll see things such as clients pop up, reports, meetings. If you've got any meetings that you've had, it will come up here, for example, there, as well as integrations, Outlook and IntelliFlow are integration that we currently have in place. So anytime you have a meeting online, you'd have a meeting bot request to join that meeting. If you say accept, and ends up recording it. If you have a face-to-face meeting, we also have an app. Now, let's say you want to go ahead and create a report. Let's go for a really simple one. Let's go for the meeting here. Let's go to a previous meeting, and I've already got a transcript waiting here. Now, this is fine-tuned specifically for a financial advisor. So if even specific terms like ISAs or SIPs is going to recognize that. All you have to do from your side, just go ahead and select the template that you want to create off the back of that transcript. I'm just going to put down the name of the client here and just click create. Now, this is Evie at play here. So what Evie is going to do now is go through the entire transcript and look to populate this into a specific format that you're looking for on the other side in this templated solution. Now, a key point around Evie and Emma, with every firm that we work with, we ensure that we bespoke Evie and Emma specific to that firm. So we almost say to firms when we work with them, treat Evie and Emma like that of support staff to make your entire team a lot more productive. You can have the output exactly to how you might want that to be. So for example, this is a template that we've created from our side. We've got everything here from meeting overview to objectives and goals, as well as risk assessment. And it's creating quite a comprehensive document here. Now, while this is just getting loaded, what you can always do is communicate with the model in the background. So what do I mean by that? Once the entire report has been generated, what you can actually do is on the right-hand side, you've got the Message Emma section. So if you've ever used ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, you're essentially getting your own version of ChatGPT for yourself, where you can go here and let's say I want to go to next step specifically, and I want to have a message for Emma to go by changing that. Heather or Alistair, got any suggestions of what I should put down here?
If this was a conversation between the advisor and the client, could we ask sort of how much depth the advisor went into in questioning on something? Would that work? So, for example, when they were talking about risk, how much depth did they go into? Is that
Yep, so
possible?
that's a great point. This specific template would be for a meeting note. So it varies through sort of templates that you're looking for on the other side. For what you're looking for, you would have to create a template for that, which we have
Yeah.
done for some firms. What you can do off the back of this, for example, is say when creating a meeting note, you could say, make this section, which is the next step section I selected here, make this section, or rather add in more soft facts.
Got you.
Right. So essentially what Emma's doing here then is rereading the entire transcript that you've used to create this meeting note and looking for all the specific soft facts that perhaps you discussed during that meeting, and will go rewriting that section again. And where this becomes really powerful is when you use not only the transcript, but you also upload additional information that perhaps you went through. So it's just gone about doing that here, adding a tremendous more amount of soft facts.
Yeah.
But this becomes a lot more powerful is when you think, great, well, I've just uploaded my cash flow model that we went through in that meeting. So what Emma can do is not only read through the transcript, but it can also cross-reference that with the cash flow model that you've also uploaded. So it can provide a tremendous amount of analysis through that. Let's go for the big one here, suitability letter. So suitability letters, annual review letters work in exactly the same fashion. So here what you'll be doing is just putting down, let's say, name of a client. Now, all I'll do from my side is exactly like how a support staff might go about doing this themselves. You go here and go, what are the bits of information that I need to go ahead and upload to ensure that they can write up a suitability letter in the most up-to-date fashion. So now what they might end up doing is, for example, going through a fact find, going through an illustration, fun fact sheet. This is for Samuel Smith, so let me just write that there. Risk questionnaires, provider information, essentially all the bits of information that you're going to be going through as a support staff when writing out a report, instead of you now having to read through every single document, what you can do now is you can just go ahead and upload all of that here. Whether it's a PDF, scanned, or even a Word document, where Emma saves a tremendous amount of time is helping with the initial heavy lifting. So instead of you having to read through so many different documents, so many different pages, instead, what Emma can do is read through all of that and look for the specific bits of information that's actually relevant to the report that you're about to write up.
So if the
And
client shows up with the proverbial shoebox, could Emma, that information be scanned in, and Emma would be able to extract the relevant information from that?
Yes. Even if it's handwriting, you can take a picture of the handwritten notes and you can also upload that. Um, the intention here, right? So our ambition whenever we work with any firm is we don't want you to have to go about changing the way that you're doing things as a firm. You can still continue with the exact same process. The only difference is the initial upfront labor, which is typically also tends to be the most time-consuming part of writing out a report.
And are you, when we're talking about suitability reports here, you're going to be using some sort of template. So are you working with a template provider, or are you asking the firms you're working with to provide their current template and populating that?
So every firm that we work with, we bespoke it to their specific templates.
Okay,
So
thank you.
to their specific template, their logos, their format, structure, as well as their tone of voice. The template that you'll see in a moment is a templated solution that we've made for demo purposes, but for the firms, we do it specifically for them. Now, what you see here is what we call MS Snapshot. So essentially, for the objective section, what you have here is a list of all the objectives Emma's found based on all the information that was uploaded. What you can do from here is you can always go ahead and add more information in or take information out. It's completely amendable or editable. And if it looks good, you just click looks good and carry on. You're essentially getting an insight into what Emma's thinking around a specific section before Emma creates the entire report for you. For example, here for risk, it's broken it down into 3 sections: capacity for loss, time horizon, risk tolerance, and investment experience. For capacity for loss here, for example, Emma's put down factors that Emma's considering before writing up this specific section of the report. So from your side, it's just you reviewing this and making sure, do I agree with everything that Emma's put down here? Or do I disagree and do I want to take anything out?
With the clients where you've implemented this, what are you seeing in terms of the number of edits that people are making? Does it change over time? At the beginning, are they editing loads and then they become more comfortable with it? It slows down. What does that look like?
Initially, there's always going to be quite a few editing because you're always trying to understand. Well, there's two parts to this, right? We think with implementing AI, it's not only a case of training yourself, or rather training the AI model to be better. It's also a case of training yourself to also go about using the AI better. So initially, there's always going to be some work around editing. We find at the starting process, this snapshot section can take anywhere from about 15 to about 25 minutes just to review this, making sure this is all accurate. But what we found over time is Emma just gets better and better. So we bespoke it to every firm that we work with. So over time, you should find that the snapshot becomes more and more specific to the things that you're looking for.
And is that built into the software? So when you're making those edits, is that feeding back into the model?
Yes.
Got you.
And they'll be feeding back the model specifically for your firm.
Yeah, great, thanks.
This is one of my favorite sections, recommendations. So as long as you put down the recommendation somewhere, let's say in the meeting notes you put down as a transfer from Aviva to Royal London, as long as you now go ahead and upload the Aviva provider pack or the Royal London provider pack, Emma can start the process of conducting the cost comparison analysis, conducting the performance analysis, as well as figuring out what are some possible reasons for why this recommendation may make sense, and what are some possible reasons for why this may not make sense. The important part here is like this. So Emma's doing a tremendous amount of analysis throughout this, but the important part to this is ensuring from your side, do I agree with the analysis that's being made here? So that process of reviewing is still critical throughout this entire process. But essentially, you go through this and go, great, looks good. You review everything that's put down here. And then when it all looks good, you just go ahead and click next. Now, Emma's going to start the process of generating the report. It will take about 1 to 2 minutes for this report to be generated. Some things to note. Where this can be extremely scalable for firms is instead of having to wait 2-3 minutes, what you can do, you can simply cross out of that. While it's still loading, you can go ahead and click create a report. and you can go ahead and do some other things while you're waiting. For example, you may want to go ahead and create an email summary. So you might go back to that transcript they went through, uh, go to email summary, create this for Sam, click create, and then while you're waiting for the email summary to be created, while you're waiting for the rather suitability letter to be created, you can conduct multiple other processes while going through that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And getting some kind of help with email summaries has been a massive improvement for us, although we use off-the-shelf software for that. But just you don't appreciate quite how much time it saves just getting
Oh,
the
for
whole
sure.
template
Yeah.
built versus just asking, just summarizing yourself. It sounds stupid, but like as those minutes add up.
Oh yeah, there's a compounding impact to that, right? And the great thing again with the email summaries, you can communicate with Emma to go about changing the email to how you might want that to come across. Um, so this is another element, and the more communication, the more messages you end up having with Emma, the more Emma ends up learning as to how you want this for the future. For the future times, you end up creating this sort of template again.
Yeah. So in your example here, I don't
Yep.
know if it's possible to just have a quick look. Could you ask that? So in the action items, could you say, bullet point these and give a who responsible and timescale? I was thinking back to the CFP case study requirements. Every action has to have a who and a when.
Writing down.
Because that also relies on the advisor to have mentioned timescales.
Yeah, exactly right. So I suppose this does vary as to the sort of information that you're uploading to Emma, but absolutely, these are all things that you'll be able to message through Emma to go about creating the output for.
Yeah, great. So then that's going to edit that sort of on the fly, is it? It's going to rewrite sections of that template as a result.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
So here we've got who, which is Bradley, who, which so Bradley here was the advisor, the client here was Sam, and then it's also done by when as well, within 2 weeks, analyze your current savings investment strategy, ensure you're on track with retirement. So you can see how it's completely amendable now. And the awesome thing about this, Alistair, is over time, the more times you message Emma that consistently, Emma will start to go, great, this is actually how Alistair wants it for the future.
Yeah, great.
Cool. And again, the process is exactly the same for all the other processes as well, whether it's suitability letters, whether it's for meeting notes, the whole lot. Great, let's go back to suitability letters, see what this is now created. Great. So again, this is a template that we've created from our side for the firms that we work with. It'd be specific to them. We've got now here is everything from exec summary, recommendation summary, circumstances now populated in tabular format, objectives expanded upon from what was there in the snapshot, attitude to risk. Again, a tremendous amount of analysis being done through here, and a part that we play to ensure that this works with firms is training Emma to the checklist that you may have as a firm around your compliance. So anytime this sort of report is being created, Emma can cross-reference that with the checklist that you may have internally. In investment strategy, the recommendation, again, expansion around the reasons for why and the disadvantages, the recommended plan charges, investment strategy, and the reasons for why this investment strategy is recommended, and then the next steps. And again, we can go ahead and add in the appendices if that's relevant for the firms that we're speaking with. But essentially now you have a completed report in a fraction of the time to how long it should normally go about taking you. On average, with the firms that we work with, it typically takes about 3 to 4 hours before using Emma and about 30 to 45 minutes after. So where's that 30, 45 minutes come from? And this is a really important part of that process. It still requires reviewing. It is not a replacement tool, it is a productivity tool. And that's a really important facet of AI. It's always human in the loop, is what we strongly believe.
That's really helpful. I think if we sort of pause the demo side of things there, now we're going to grill you about it, if that's all right.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask was from I was at a Paraplanners Assembly event, their big day out recently, and it was really interesting because there was a few paraplanners there who were using Advisory AI, and and others that are experimenting with other tools. And one of the things they were talking about was that they have a particular way of writing. So individual power planners within a firm will have a
Yep.
slightly different approach to writing. And they found it really difficult to give up that tone of voice. I thought it was really interesting because I thought, but shouldn't the suitability letter be the tone of the firm? And that should be agreed at a firm
Mm.
level. But the power planners were saying that, I've done this for so long and I have my way of doing it, and it's just a different tone, slightly different structure.
Yep.
And they were like, yeah, it saves me a lot of time, but then I sometimes feel like I have to put it back into the way I would have written it. And I was just wondering what your view is on that, because it struck me as a really odd thing to say, but it was actually really consistent across the different people. And they almost said it was hard for them to read it with the rigor that they wanted to really digest it and understand it and read it if it was written in a different way than they would typically written it. So is it a different skill set? What do you think?
It's so funny you say this because we come across this all the time. Especially with larger firms who have 30, 40 power planners within the firm. You're talking about some people who have done it for decades and others who have just done it for 1, 2 years. They'll have a very different way of doing things. And also the output tends to be very different as well. I agree with you, Heather. I believe the suitability letter should be the tone of voice of the firm as opposed to a singular individual. But that being said, the tone of voice should be to the best report format that you can come out with, right? And so this is the case that we try to put forward with any firm that we work with, which is let's have a roundtable with the leaders around the power planning department, and let's discuss what the report should look like in the best case scenario. Typically, those individuals who are slightly nuancing their reports in a certain fashion, they're doing that because they believe that's a better way to go about doing that report. And others may do it slightly differently because uh, that nuanced way of doing things would just consume a lot of their time, and so it may not be the best use of their time. Whatever that might be, when speaking with firms, the intention here is let's understand what a perfect report looks like, or let's understand what a great report looks like, and let's make sure everyone can move towards that pathway. There should be some form of homogeneous reports in the fashion for a specific firm. Now, there's even the conversation, or a larger conversation here. There's about 5,000 firms in the UK, and each firm would have a slightly nuanced suitability letter, a different way of presenting this to the client. Now, 4,999 firms can't have the best suitability letter. So there's also the conversation there as to like, well, what is perhaps the one best suitability letter that you could have across the whole country? Maybe that's a larger point that we're going to come try and tackle at a later point. But to answer your question, yes, we get it all the time. We believe the answer to that is just having a roundtable discussion and saying, look, we're all aiming for the same thing here. How can we present something to a client that's going to be extremely well readable and also something that's going to be efficient for the firm to conduct in terms of going
Yeah.
forward?
I love that answer because it's about how you change people's behaviors, how you engage them in the process to bring them on the journey with you. And that's one of the things that Johnny talked about. It's one of the things that Kapil from Salesforce talked about, was the importance of bringing the people on that journey, because you're asking people to make a pretty significant change. And the way to make sure that that change is successful is you really need to invest in change management, which is what you're talking about. Right. The real grilling from Alistair.
Yeah, so I tend to try and focus on challenges and risks because I am a massive geek, and I'm hugely positive on AI and technology, but I try and maintain my own momentum, or control my own momentum by thinking about what could go horribly wrong. And there's so much potential for things to go horribly wrong when we're starting to introduce AI models into suitability. I would really like to hear about where those issues tend to come up when you're onboarding clients. Where
Mhm.
are things going wrong, and what can people learn, even if they're not using your software, but what can people learn about implementing these sorts of AI assistants into their productivity from those mistakes?
Yeah, great question. One word, expectation. Uh, when we have conversation with firms, they almost go, "Great, your tool can write a suitability letter. When suitability letter is created, amazing. I'll just go ahead and send that to the client." So the expectation's got to be set from the get-go. And there's a lot of misalignment at the moment with advising firms, because largely when you use SaaS models or SaaS tools out there, like software tools, it's typically if you do this, if you do A, then B will come across from the other side. It's just not the same thing with generative AI. If you end up uploading one bit of information, for example, we showcased the email summary there. If we uploaded that same transcript and created the email summary again, the output will be slightly different from the last time, right? And it may be because it would say, instead of saying, hi, Alistair, it now says, dear Alistair, for example. So there's always going to be nuances, there's differences that generative AI, as it learns over time, it can go about changing the outputs. What this means then is that there always needs to be reviewing throughout this entire process. And that's such an important facet of that. So it's the one, setting expectation that it's not going to do the entire job. It's not a replacement tool. It is a productivity tool. And the second part is, in order for you to end up utilizing it the way that it should be, you should always be reviewing it. And there should be like stages to that reviewing process. For example, reviewing the information you're uploading, reviewing the snapshot that we've created from our side, and then reviewing the end report that's been created.
Yeah, absolutely. That review bit is so important, and I keep, I am concerned that we will behave like we do whenever you get a new piece of technology, and we'll be very, very focused on that for a while until we go, oh, well, the last 8 didn't need much editing, so this one we'll send out without editing, and then that one's got a massive howler in it. That comes back to the change management, train the people around the tech thing, I guess. One of the other things that we've been, Professor Adrian Hopgood at our last AI Lab event made a really good point, and that was not just to talk about accuracy rates, but to talk about type 1 and type 2 errors and what impact they have on the outcome. So false positives and false negatives. And he was talking about it in a medical capacity, but he was saying false negatives can have an outsized impact. If the AI model's saying actually that person probably doesn't have cancer, say, but actually it turns out they do, and the AI just got it wrong. Obviously, big health impacts. But I'm conscious that we're another heavily regulated space, and if the AI model says, to take a very technical example, there are no guaranteed annuity rates or guaranteed minimum pension allowances on the thing we're looking at, and it turns out there are. Never mind that could be a problem, could be picked up in the check. My worry would then be that whoever did that picking up, the member of the team, the paraplanner, say, is now never going to trust that software again.
Yeah.
because it's nearly right, but that one bit's wrong. And then so I wonder if you could comment on that at all, about how you deal with false positives and false negatives as a business, as a piece of software.
Yeah, it's a great question. And to make it specific to what it is that we're doing, then the question that we're constantly trying to answer for firms is, how can we help these firms make it easy as possible to go about reviewing the output that Emma's creating? So what we've recently come out with is citations. For example, if I quickly share my screen again, what you'll be able to see here is like a whole host of citations throughout. And you mentioned guaranteed, so this comes nicely. So we can also summarize LOA packs here, but it can go ahead and give you the answers, GMP, GAR, and it can go about citing and see exactly where in the document this was received from. So the intention here is, how can we ensure that process of reviewing is made as simply as possible, but you're absolutely spot on. Emma will be wrong, right? There's always that question of accuracy, right? Yes, but there is the 1%, 2%, 3% chance that you can be wrong. The other day, I had a conversation with someone named Gillian, but when I looked at the transcript, it came out as Julian instead of Gillian, for example. Those are all small nuances that can continue to crop up, but that reviewing process is important. But to your point, that reviewing process has to be really easy, consistent, and something that people can go about doing almost nonchalantly, very, very simply.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really helpful. And I would like there to be some more transparency from providers on false positives and false negatives. I think that'll only happen if we keep asking people for them. So I'm gonna keep on asking that question. we're talking quite a bit in the lab about due diligence and
Mhm.
due diligence questions and answers. If there were, I accept that you're going to tell me all of the questions that you'll be able to answer the best.
Yep.
I say that, tongue firmly in cheek. But if there were one or two really key questions you think advisors and planners should be asking firms they're looking to partner with or use the software of, the top one or two, anything that comes to mind straight away?
Yeah. Open source model or closed source model. That's one. What do I mean by that? An open source model is a model in which anyone can go ahead and attach themselves with and then create their own model off the back of that or fine tune a model specifically for their own company. A closed source model is one that you can attach yourselves with, but then it's only going to be utilizing their resources. For example, there's the likes of ChatGPT as well as Claude out there, and you can attach yourselves through that with an API. The question you need to be asking yourselves here is it is the information you're uploading to that platform, is that going to the likes of ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, or is it a specific fine-tuned model that that firm has themselves? And it's an important question here because it just means the more third parties this information is being passed towards, there's therefore a higher risk of your information being out there in the atmosphere. That's one really important one. And another one is penetration testing around cybersecurity. So, this just holds that firm accountable to ensure they are constantly getting checked and earmarked to ensure they are doing the cybersecurity check that they should be doing. Those are probably two, and uh, they're both very extremely strenuous processes for the firms, and so we've been through that. And yeah, I'll definitely say those 2 points.
Yeah, really, really good points. Um, before we get into our rapid fire closing questions, I just want to ask about the results you're seeing from firms. So the impact. You mentioned that the focus was on driving efficiency within businesses. Are you able to share? I mean, I know Johnny shared some stats on the podcast that we did about what they experienced at Lyft, but can you share some use case examples or numbers for what you've been able to help firms
Yep.
achieve?
That's very nice of Johnny to have done that. So, Lyft is a great case. So we work with Lyft now for coming nearly to a year now. And within that year, they have about 20 advisors across the company. Within that year, they have doubled the capacity of clients the advisors can go ahead and take on from 100 to 200 clients per advisor, which is astonishing. Essentially, the only reason why we do this, right? Because we want to end up ensuring we can increase the client capacity per advisor across the country. What that meant then was for the past 10, 15 years for Lyft, they've had a very hard stop at 100 clients per advisor. So for the first time, what they've done here, they've gone, actually, we've got so much more time now due to saved time from not having to do meeting notes anymore, annual review letters or ad hoc review letters. They essentially can go about increasing their client capacity to that amount. In terms of data, what we tend to find is with firms who end up coming to our platform typically take about 3 to 4 hours on average to go ahead and create a suitability letter. Annual review letters being slightly less than that, around an hour to 2 hours uh, per firm on average. After using Emma and Evie, it takes around 30 minutes for an annual review letter and about 45 minutes for a suitability letter. So we're starting to see a significant reduction in the amount of time that it goes about taking to write up a suitability letter or annual review letter, typically around 80 to 90% time savings. Almost with every firm that we do and they're working within the first 30 days, you should already be saving about 50% of your time in report writing.
Fantastic. I think one of the things that's so powerful about the Lyft case study is also that they've done time tracking for
Yeah, it's an
yonks, and so
awesome
they
case, right?
know how much they're saving. And it's I mean, I run a professional services business. I'm not a financial planner, but if you're not tracking the time, then you're not going to know how much you're saving. But it's really tough about being honest about what you're doing. So those are great case studies. I know our financial advice business benchmarks report, which our last podcast was a ridiculous notebook LM summary of that report. But we said it was the average time to onboard a new client from initial advice until delivering the advice was on average 4 to 5 weeks, 33 days, and that hasn't progressed at all in the 4 years that we've been tracking that. And the number one thing slowing firms down is getting data from clients and getting data from providers. And so
Sure.
that's why I asked about the proverbial shoebox, because it is a challenge, right? It's not going to solve it all, but fantastic. Let's move on to the final section, rapid fire. So we like to end our podcast with a few rapid fire questions. First one, how can firms get started? And we have a rule, no meeting note summaries. So how can we get started with using AI?
Gotcha. A variety of different ways. For example, I use something called, which is also going to be my answer for the second question that you've also sent to me as well, Heather. It's an application called Superhuman. So Superhuman's a way to reply to emails. But what they've done is they've added like an AI twist to that, which is really interesting. They've created shortcuts essentially to go about replying back to emails. What's awesome about how they use AI for this is Superhuman can read through your entire emails that you sent over the past number of years. So if you're thinking back and going, what did I end up sending out to Heather a couple of years back? Have I ever sent her that document? You can just ask the AI bot from Superhuman, and Superhuman can read through all your emails and come back to you with the answer. I think that was a great way that firms can start to utilize something like AI, not only for meeting notes.
I was just going to say that I tried one of those, but it's probably about a year ago. So it was maybe a little bit early. And I was asking it questions and it couldn't figure out who, because people that I was trying to, I was like, I know I've talked to this person before, but they changed companies. And
Sure.
but that kind of, I mean, I've tried Gemini, I've tried a bunch of these things for script, for doing a draft of an email. That sounds fantastic. You sold me on Superhuman for human.
Oh, it's so good. And like, so for example, recently, we get a ton of feedback constantly from clients, which is amazing. And so all I've asked Superman to do is go, great, list out all the feedback specifically around this section. And it just breaks it all down for me. And I go, great, let's just go ahead and work on that now. So now I don't need to go through 30, 40 emails, read each one and figure out who sent me feedback, who hasn't. Massive time saver.
And that's also, I suppose, the promise of the kind of co-pilot integration if you're deep in the 365 ecosystem, which I know so many of our listeners will be. Of course, sadly, it doesn't deliver on its promise very effectively most of the time. Well, I'm going to make you think of a different application that's made a big difference to you day to day. Then, given that you've given your answer in the first question. So, is there anything else that you use, big or small, where actually just a little bit of an AI twist has helped you?
I'll do a massive AI edition. One is Claude. Claude, ChatGPT, I use this still every single day to go through my functions, everything from, yes, meeting notes, all the way down to how I want certain outputs to be, whether it's even through looking at certain possibilities of what can be done with this sort of technology. I almost communicate with Claude and ChatGPT as if it's my own best friend. Like throughout the entire day, I'll have constant communications with this. So probably to a point where if you ever read my history of the communications I've had, you probably go, all right, this is very sad. But I use this on a day-to-day basis, and I think it's incredible.
Great answer.
I'm looking forward to my Spotify Unwrapped. I was thinking that a really good thing for ChatGPT to do would be a chat unwrapped and like a highlight of all the different types of topics that you've asked ChatGPT about or Claude in the last year. So maybe next year they'll do it for us.
But you know what's really interesting about that, Heather, is what you can now do with ChatGPT. You can start up a new chat and go, based on all the conversations we've had, how would you describe me as a person? And they can then go through everything that you've ever spoken with ChatGPT about. I did it the other day, and it goes, "You talk a lot about B2B SaaS businesses," and I go, "Yeah, that's right."
So funny, so funny. All right, podcast or book recommendation. You obviously know a lot more about AI than most people, I think, that will be listening. So, what podcast or book would you recommend?
Sure. Um, I mean, a great podcast I always end up listening to is 20 VC. If you ever come across that before, 20 VC is great. Um, he's also based in the UK as well, which is amazing. There's also another podcast called Y Combinator podcast. So Y Combinator is an accelerator based over in the US, and they have some amazing companies that come out of the YC batch. And off the back of this, they also have some incredible people who talk about everything from AI, what the future of AI looks like, and they just tend to have quite a fun conversation. Another one that I'm just going on here, one last one rather, is the All In podcast as well. Um, it's a really interesting podcast. I wouldn't necessarily say it's my favorite, but they do have a lot of insights that I do think are interesting.
Brilliant. There's some to add to the list. So it's a growing list, which is a nice problem to have. So this might be my favorite question because we've had some great examples. But what would you say has been your biggest AI failure?
As in, like personally for my company.
Yeah. Well, personally for you, it could be absolutely anything. Where has it gone so horribly wrong that you've got a story to tell about it?
Sure. Cool. Where do I start? Um, I'm trying to think of ones that I'll be able to tell in this podcast.
Well, we've had
So,
everything from Heather trying to bake a cake, and I can't remember what ingredient did it decide you didn't need, and you thought you'd give it a go anyway.
Oh, yeah. So it wanted me to mix the wet ingredients and then add the dry ingredients and then add butter at the end. It just doesn't mix that way. It just doesn't work.
well, um, well, I've got one that I'm incredibly embarrassed about. So I was, I was going to one of my so what we do on a year by year basis is I end up meeting with all of my cousins because two of my cousins have the same birthday and the same date. And we all come together. So there's about a good 20 of us who all come together. And uh, so for the last year in 2023 now, we all went to an ice rink and we went ice skating, which is really nice. But what we do for this is we go ahead and give them a whole bunch of gifts and presents just before we get in the ice rink. So for this day, I ended up providing the presents, but I bought a card as I normally do. But who's got time now to go on writing an entire list of all the reasons for why you're so grateful, right? Is what I was thinking. So I've gone, uh, write, write a really nice happy birthday to my cousin as if it's your own cousin. That's what I put down the prompt as for ChatGPT to do. But what I've just done is I've copied and pasted it. And what I'm copying basically it's got everything right here. I've gone, great, this is already good. And it's ended it with saying, because I put down as if it's your own cousin, it's put down love ChatGPT. And so I've just gone and copied and pasted the whole thing without even thinking other because I've read the whole thing up until, dear Alicia, all the way down, and I'm sure it's got everything good now. So that's probably my biggest AI fail. And it's also a very embarrassing story that I've got terrible attention to detail.
Somebody needs to invent an AI proofreading bot. That's what I've heard from today. You want to put your suitability reports through that. You want to put your birthday messages through that. The person who solves that is clearly going to be the next billion-dollar company.
Spot on. When there's a gold rush, be selling axes, right? Be selling pickaxes, right? Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alan. I really enjoyed that. Alistair and I are going to stay on for a bit and just swap notes on what we took away from that conversation. But I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Well, what a great sort of discussion. A bit of a demo through the product of Advisory AI. I think it's fair to say they're already the most sort of established and kind of spoken about, certainly in our circles, piece of software. So it's great to get Alan on to talk through some of the detail. What were your sort of top of mind thoughts from that then, Heather, in terms of reflections from our discussion?
I think that Alan's background in as a financial planner makes a huge difference to the focus on understanding what a planner does. And it's just such a leap forward compared to some of the other tech, not other AI solutions, but just other tech where people think, oh, this will really solve the advice gap, but they're not thinking about what are the problems in an advice business. And I think Alan's experience in an advice business just turns that a bit on its head. I thought his numbers around moving from 100 clients to 200 clients is really interesting because that'll definitely be a motivator for some. But actually, what we hear is that there's a healthy proportion who just want to help make the job a bit more pleasant, take away some of the aggro, take away some of the admin for their staff and for their clients, and that might mean that they deal with more clients, but it also might mean that they drive job satisfaction. It might mean that they can lower fees. It might mean that they can, you know, work 4 days a week or whatever that is. So I think that's, there's impressive statistics. But I would just nuance that. I think I think he's solving a problem that actually exists, and that's fantastic. And we've seen a real life application of it, and it's working. Which is fantastic because the amount of moaning I hear in the market about tech isn't moving forward, da 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 da, it is, and it's so great to see a problem actually being solved by tech.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think um, I always worry with demos because if people haven't noticed by now, I'm always the dissenting voice in one of these conversations, and I worry that we get a very we get a very sort of perfected version of what things might look like, and so to know. And I've spoken to Johnny privately on a couple of occasions, Johnny Stubbs at Lyft, about their implementation, how it's working. And I think he said at one point at the AI lab that something like 95% of their advisors are using the meeting notes. So they might not have got everything through for everybody, but they have got that one bit absolutely nailed down from a change management perspective in the business. And even if it's just that, so on a much smaller scale, we've done that with off-the-shelf software with meeting notes, and it is just enhancing the client experience and saving time. Because that's the other bit that I think we really need to be thinking about. It isn't just time saving. It's not just about serving more clients, but it's enhancing the client experience as well. Email summaries of meetings are something we just never thought to do. I'm quite embarrassed to say that, I guess, really, looking back on it, because we were writing reports and we were seeing clients. The feedback is the email summary is actually more important to the clients than the report afterwards very often, because it's top of mind, it's short, it's sort of punchy, and it gets the message across. So that enhanced client experience, I think, is a really good selling point of the concept of embracing this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's interesting how paraplanner attitudes have moved on a lot. And I've mentioned this at our AI lab at the Paraplanners Assembly, speaking with paraplanners at Lyft and other places. A year ago, the view at that event was that AI was a real threat to their job. And now they see it as, oh, this is great actually, because it works really, really well for some of the stuff that they don't really need to do. And for the really complex cases, they still need to get involved because it does require a lot of thinking, a lot of work. And so they really get to use their brains. So yeah, I think it's yeah, fantastic to see it in action. Great, well done to Alan and the team because they've really listened. They've really helped to solve a problem that exists, and look forward to seeing how it evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. So next time we're going to be speaking, this will be in 2 weeks' time. We're going to be speaking to Gary Ablella from LOA. They recently rebranded from CodePan, and this is quite a very different approach to a bit of AI software because they've taken a very, not a small problem, but it's a part of the process, and they've absolutely focused on nailing that one bit, as opposed to AdvisoryAI, who've taken a much wider view. So it'll be an interesting contrast, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you to our sponsors, SS&C, Aviva, Fidelity, and Salesforce. Thank you to you, Alistair, for joining me on the podcast. And thanks to our producer, Artemis Irvin. Great conversation as always. And if you're interested in joining AI Lab, I think we're down to 4 firms that we can take now. So get in touch. The next meeting in January.
Yeah, great. Speak to you soon, Heather.